Good morning and welcome to our MNP networking breakfast. My name is Bill Pegg and I'm a member of the committee for the Chamber for the networking breakfast. Our sponsors today are MNP LLP and our media sponsor is the Waterloo Region Record. So thanks for their support. Without the support of organizations throughout the Chamber area to the various events, we wouldn't be able to put on these events because some of our speakers don't come cheap. Karen Redman is an example. I mean, she's well, you know.
She's classy but never cheap.
Yeah, not my line. So, so I'm going to introduce. I'm going to do this introduction first. They threw me a little curveball this morning. We're going to acknowledge some of our more worthy guests. Should I say that? We've got Mayors Verbanovic, Jaworski, Shantz, Nowak, McGarry, Armstrong, and Foxton. We have Regional Councillors Clark, Galloway, Erb, Kiefer, and Jowett. We have Councillor Freeman from Waterloo. Police Chief Larkin is here for security purposes, brought a couple of... Region Waterloo CAO Mike Murray. Did I get that right? Okay, good. I'm expecting the hook here. Region Waterloo CAO, said that one already, she just wrote it in red. Board Chair Kelly McManus is here from the Chamber. Past Board Chair Renata Rosiniak. So please acknowledge our guests. I would also like to acknowledge our committee that puts on this event. We have, and I'm going to ask you to stand when your name is called, and then when I'm done, you have to sit back down again. Just remember that. So, Mike Hewitson, he's our chair coming into this season. Mackenzie Baker, Delton Clark Brighton, Stephen Goodfellow, Nick Hefner, Renee Howe, Jane Marshall, Mike McCaffrey, and Paula Stangetti. Okay. If you have any questions, you look around for one of these people because we have the sparkly lanyards. See this? Not everybody gets these. So, yeah, it's always cheap shots. You know, these come from the, anyway, I won't say anything because he's from MNP. So, I will acknowledge Jane Marshall, though. Jane Marshall and her company, Stevens E3, provided this backdrop for the Chamber that's going to be used at a number of Chamber events, and it was introduced on Tuesday night, Ian, at the AGM. So if you need any backdrops done up, Jane's done a couple for me. She's here today, and grab her business card and she'll be glad to look after you. Okay, so we have some networking and educational events coming up. There are a handful of booths available for the Business Expo on October 16th at Bingham's. I noticed that Lawrence was here. Hosted in partnership with Guelph and Cambridge Chambers of Commerce. So that'll be a great event. It's always a great event. 100 Mile Feast will be at the end of the month, October 28th at the Delta. This year's theme is Taste of Thailand, and tickets are available, I assume, online. Kelly? Our next NBS event will feature two local success stories, Brian Baisley from Driver's Seat and Stephanie Soulis from Little Mushroom Catering, and registration is now available online. That'll be a really good one. So, be sure to check the Chamber website for more information. And now Paula Stangetti is going to come up, one of our committee members, and give you a networking moment.
Thanks, Bill, and good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here as a member of the Networking Breakfast Committee. Every time we do these, we acknowledge that the purpose of being together is to network. And so just some little tidbits for you, some pieces of wisdom from experience, perhaps. I'd like to start with maybe something that challenges your idea of what networking is. So in my mind, networking is more about relationships than it is about getting business. The business comes when we build relationships. So when you're here, the most important thing to do is say hello to people, share your business card for the purpose of meeting with them at some time and starting that relationship. It's not an easy thing to do all the time, but you have to start somewhere. And the popular saying of how do you eat an elephant is one bite at a time. So I think of it as one card at a time. So today, while you're here, please share your card. Think about connecting with that person as soon as possible after today and make a meeting with them. Come and talk, chat, learn more about them as a person, and the rest will follow. In order to make the conversations easy as you continue to eat breakfast, we've introduced something new this year. The cards on your table that look like this have on the back of them just some discussion starter questions. So pick one and ask that this morning of your table mates as you're having breakfast. So you might start with something like, how did you get involved in your industry or company? Or how do you spend your time outside of work? Well, maybe you want to talk about that, maybe you don't want to talk about that. But we give it to you as an opportunity. We're going to have the cards here at each of the meetings, so please use them. Meet people. After all, that's the reason why we're here. We said this morning that there was a great buzz happening in the room, and it took us back to our days as kids. This meeting always feels like our back-to-school event. So welcome. Enjoy the morning, enjoy the speaker, and the opportunity to meet and begin building relationships. Take care.
Speaking of cards, and speaking of cell phones, if you have one of these in your pocket, and everybody does, two things. A, turn it to vibrate or whatever, but B, go ahead and use it throughout use your social media throughout the meeting today and spread the word. So, I'm now going to ask, oh, by the way, I forgot, did everybody put a card in the little bin up there? You got to put a card in there. You put a card in when you come in, and you take a card out when you leave. Hopefully not your own. So if you're going to put 25 of your business cards in, you might get your own back. So that's the little thing we've started to do. All right. I'd now like to invite Akash Arya, Senior Manager from our title sponsor, MNP LLP, to introduce Karen and Ian. Thanks.
Hi everybody, I am Akash Arya and have been part of MNP for over 9 years working in our assurance and accounting group. MNP is Canada's 5th largest and leading national accounting, tax, and business consulting firm. We proudly serve and respond to the needs of our clients in the public, private, and not-for-profit sectors. Our service offerings are coast to coast, and it's a pleasure to be here today and be one of the title sponsors. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing you to the keynote speaker, Karen Redman, Regional Chair. Karen Redman is the Regional Chair of the Waterloo region, having been elected in the October 22nd, 2018 municipal election. Karen has been dedicated to public service for more than 20 years. She has represented the community at several levels of government, including federal, municipal, and the Board of Education. Prior to being elected as chair, she served on regional council as a representative for the city of Kitchener. Karen has a master's degree in political science as well as an honors bachelor's degree in English. Among her professional endeavors, Karen served as Chief Executive Officer at Habitat for Humanity Waterloo Region from 2010 to 2018. In other community activities, Karen has served as Chair of the Independent Living Center of Waterloo Region, President of the Rotary Club of Kitchener 2014 to 2015, and a board member of Martin Lutheran University College, formerly Waterloo Lutheran Seminary. Karen is also an elder at St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church in Kitchener. Karen is the recipient of the Queen's Jubilee Medal and the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal. Karen Redman is a lifelong resident of Waterloo Region. She currently resides in Kitchener, and she and her husband Warren have 4 grown children. Karen Redman, everybody.
Thank you, Akash. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to start by acknowledging that we are on the traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and the Neutral people. And what First Nations have taught us as we share the land, that our relationship with the land should be one about stewardship, not ownership. So we thank them as we go forward together. I am so glad that Bill announced all of the regional councilors that are here. It is a great team, and I have to tell you that being regional chair is just one vote. Sometimes I feel like I'm doing the traffic control at the region of Waterloo, but it is an amazing team. So much so that when we got here, Dave Jaworski said to me, I was going to text you, these are really high chairs, it's a pant day. So any women in the audience know, you don't want to wear a short, tight skirt. Did it once and will not be repeated. Being regional chair has been a little bit like drinking from a fire hose, and it hasn't quite been a year, so I guess we're cheating just a little bit. Twice in the past year at a public event, somebody has introduced me as Karen Sealing. And you know, I take it as a compliment, because I think it speaks to the strong leadership and the stability of successive councils and of staff. And they have provided a position that I can now have a front row seat to an amazing time in our community and in municipal politics. We're facing change, I think almost on an unprecedented scale and pace. At its worst, change is distracting and it's destabilizing, but it's also so full of potential that we can help craft the future and our collective future together. Earlier this week, somebody at a public event said to me, what was the most pleasant surprise that you had as regional chair? And I have to tell you, I think that's the first time anyone's ever asked me that question. And without a doubt, hands down, it was the launch of the ION. On the last day of spring in 2019, after decades of planning and construction that seemed to impact and certainly inconvenience almost everybody in the region, and we heard about it, we launched the ION. It was a collective experience of coming of age. There was a pervasive sense of goodwill, almost euphoria, and that spread throughout the region. It wasn't just Tom Galloway. The ION is shaping our future as a region. Ridership has exceeded even the most optimistic predictions. There has been $3.5 billion of private investment. Rumor has it that Waterloo Region has about 50% of the number of cranes building things in our region as in New York City. Pretty stunning. And more to come as we move on to Cambridge in Phase 2. But how did we get here? How did we get to this juncture? The implementation of light rail transit is the culmination of decades of successive councils and staff putting their nose to the grindstone. It is providing significant impact and underscoring the interconnectivity of all of the communities that this community represents as a region. It's the result of strategically executed long-term vision. The ION is as much about planning as it is about transportation. I just realized there's a little clock here, it just beeped. The Countryside Line is a regional commitment to protect urban and rural mix of our communities, and it's a testament to our commitment to manage growth. It also protects groundwater, recharge areas, and it protects our farmland. By building up along the LRT corridor, we can achieve the density targets set by the province and still protect the quality of life that we all enjoy. Many bright minds are attracted to our region by the outstanding universities, the University of Waterloo, Laurier, and our award-winning community college. We've got Perimeter Institute, CG, Communitech, and Google, and they all impact who decides that they're going to come and work in Waterloo Region. But they decide to stay and raise their families because of the hometown feel and the big city amenities that Waterloo Region offers. They stay to enjoy that quality of life that we all do. Now, protecting our rural communities is not a nostalgic nod to our past. It's an acknowledgement of the economic importance of agriculture and food processing in our regional economy. You may not know, but it's one of the 5 top economic drivers of our region. But also the physical infrastructure, the ease of getting around the community, and that is a little bit better now that the ION's up and running, really are important assets to how we view our community. Without proper maintenance and management of planned growth, there are concerns about increased congestion on the roads and the future sustainability of our transportation system. We know that the environment is very important to the people who live in Waterloo Region. As a matter of fact, last week, Waterloo Region became the first region in Canada to be a B city, and that's BEE. And we joined Wellesley Township and the cities of Waterloo and Kitchener as B communities. And I know Catherine McGarry is very anxious to get Cambridge on that list as well. It's true that farmers feed cities, but it's also important to recognize the role that urban dwellers can play in providing habitats for pollinators. Our residents understand both the role of growth and the factors that impact the environment. They also recognize a healthy and natural environment is essential to our collective and individual well-being. I've learned over the years that no one level of government can do it all, and it can't do it alone. And this may be stating the obvious, but the region very much depends on the federal and provincial partnerships. And we are most effective when speaking with one voice to senior levels of government. The result of an engaged community, of civil society who weighs in, of the business community, chambers of commerce, it makes a difference. When Waterloo Region approaches issues that are focused on local priorities, and I saw this firsthand when I was a federal member and Waterloo Region came talking about the ION, or the LRT as it was called at the time. Whether we're talking about two-way all-day go, we bring a value proposition and we bring solutions. Governments don't want to hear they need more money. They want to know how they can be more effective and how we can work together to bring about the services that people need. From my experience, federal governments seek ways to impact communities. What federal governments, irrespective of their stripe, lack is the on-the-ground involvement and knowledge of specific needs of the municipalities. And that's why they've provided environmental funding that is distributed to municipalities and provided a one-time doubling of the gas tax to $34.4 million in 2019. We need to continue to find joint initiatives at both levels of government. These kinds of partnerships have resulted in an investment of $57 million from the federal government for transit and $47 million from the province. Our bus maintenance facility, through a bilateral funding agreement, was announced at the end of the summer, and that's a $120 million project. And it's integral to our plan to increase the GRT fleet by 20%, so that ridership can be increased by 30% over the next 5 years. Housing funds to develop affordable housing and social housing. We've managed a $5.4 million investment by the federal and provincial governments to build approximately 43 units. And you know, affordable housing is something that I hear in every round table that I have in conversations. People really do care about those left behind. And affordability is a very elastic term. I've been in very Tony cocktail parties and heard people talking about how their kids can't afford to get into the housing market. And then we have people that need shelter, need supportive housing and affordable housing. And it's lower down on the continuum, but it's all part of the solution. We have housed a lot of people, but the reality is more people get added to the list. So it's always a moving target and something that we need to be very focused on solving. So where are we going as a region? How will we know when we've arrived? We have two overarching plans. One is the regional official plan that deals with land use and development, and the other is our strategic plan. We are currently developing a strategic plan for 2019-2023. And it's interesting to note that carries over to the next term of council, because if you're going to have long-term strategic planning, you can't do it from election to election. Our plans are value-based, they're visionary, and they inform all of the things that we do at the region. The values of the region are service, integrity, respect, innovation, and collaboration. One of our key roles as a regional municipal government is to create a foundation, the framework and the infrastructure, and the conditions for business to thrive. The ultimate goal is sustainable urban, rural, quality of life, and livability throughout our entire region. We're trying to create a community that is attractive and welcoming to people who could live anywhere in the world, and to businesses who could invest and grow anywhere in the world. We want to create a quality of life that will attract and keep them here. Fostering a safe, inclusive, and connective community is very important to the people who live in Waterloo region. There are social conditions and some big city problems that are on our doorstep, such as addictions and a lack of inclusion. They have a great impact on the health and the quality of life for some of our citizens and the safety in our community. And I want to give a shout out right now to Chief Larkin and all of the other fine representatives of Waterloo Regional Police who are here today. They're incredible partners, and part of that collaboration and partnership is really what moves us forward in such an outstanding way as a community. And I thank you for always being an element of good and a positive impact in our community. And I want you to know that I thought that would say that even if I wasn't chair of the Waterloo Regional Police Service Board. Flowing from the regional official plan and strategic plan are several 10-year master plans. There's transportation, the Grand River Transit Business Plan, housing, our airport plan, and our paramedic master plan. And it's these plans that help us decide how we move forward. The budget indicates the pace of change, but it doesn't change the course. And it's formidable. We have a $1.5 billion budget, but we still have to balance the community desire for more and better services with reasonable and responsible tax increases. The budget adjusts our pace, but the regional official plan and the master plans ensure that we have a course and that we continue on a right direction. Partnerships and collaborations define our region. Regional decision-making is not done in isolation. Social services and public health depend on partnerships and collaboration in order to be relevant and provide successful solutions. The Waterloo Regional Integrated Drug Strategy Team dealt with the opioid crisis. It's part of crime prevention, public health, as well as members from Canadian Mental Health weighing in to be part of that strategy. Our regional outreach workers, who are funded by the region, are engaged with street-involved people to build trust and to help us move forward in a positive direction. And I don't know how many of you know that there are outreach workers in the city of Waterloo and a whole team in the city of Kitchener that are funded by the BIA, because business realizes that what's good for the community is good for them. This ensures effective outcomes. Now, Wellbeing Waterloo is also something that the police have been involved with, public health has, and so many people in this room. It's a two-year-old community collaborative with a focus on ensuring that as a community, everyone thrives and no one is left behind. Based on the research from this two-year-long process, we launched a Smart Cities bid to get $50 million, which was offered by the federal government. And it was to look at things that would change the community, that would be scalable and would involve technology. And instead of turning away from some of the really depressing statistics that Wellness Waterloo region exposed, some of them were that our youth felt isolated and disengaged, that our rates of graduation from secondary school were lower than the provincial and national averages. Very typical of Waterloo region, we took it on. We looked at it face on and decided that what we would bid for is to be a benchmark community for children and youth well-being by using early intervention, youth engagement, and technology. And we involve people like Technology for Good. So I have to tell you, if I had a great moment at the launch of the ION, I had a huge disappointment when we were not chosen as the winner. But you know what? Another community may have got that $50 million over 5 years. But what we got were the synergies, the cooperation, and the initiatives that were invested by the members of this community for this community, as well as $110,000 that was on the table. And we're still continuing to look and building on that momentum, and nobody's walked away. UNICEF Canada was also one of our partners. It was a very strong bid, but I'm not bitter. I just want you to know that. We're on the global stage, promoting and marketing Waterloo region through Waterloo Economic Development Corporation. We're competing for talent investment for advanced manufacturing. In 2018, $320.7 million worth of investment deals were brought through the efforts of Waterloo Economic Development. 908 new jobs were created. And of the 15 deals closed in 2018, 8 were local expansion investments and 7 were foreign direct investments. It's a pretty good track record, don't you think? Waterloo region is responsible for 17% of Canada's GDP. We punch way above our weight. And you know, for any of you that have been on national boards or been part of associations that are pan-Canadian, I used to think years ago when I became a trustee that we did a lot of, you know, sort of patting ourselves on the back. But when you get out there and you see what cutting-edge collaboration, innovation, and thinking how we solve a problem, our pragmatic approach to doing things that actually have an impact, we are leaders. And it's the collective effort of all of us that gets us there. So there's been a little bit of a change in the provincial government, some of you may have noticed. And this provincial government, I think, came in on a mandate of change. And that uncertainty can create a cloud. And there is no doubt that they, I think it was for 7 weeks, every Friday night about 5 o'clock, they were putting out press releases last spring. And generally speaking, we all know that doesn't mean it's good news. But we've adjusted and we've moved forward. 2020 budget has some challenges. Some of the announced changes impact service levels, and we will continue to deal with those. But you know, the region of Waterloo has one of the most cost-effective municipalities in Ontario. Over the last 5 years, we've reduced our base operating budgets by more than $12 million. Currently, we've engaged KPMG to do a service review update to identify ways that we can be more efficient and we can be more effective. There's a prospect of public health being restructured. That's supposed to happen as of April 1st, 2020, and we continue to work with the Ministry of Health to try to find ways to say that let us help shape how that goes forward. The Waterloo region has public health embedded within our organization, and we've been very well served over the years with their input and their participation, and not just in the kind of things that you generally think public health is dealing with. It's with planning, groundwater source protection, transit. So they have been an integral part of a very effective team. I'm going to end off here with the regional governance review. Some of you may have noticed that the Waterloo region is one of 8 regional municipalities being reviewed by the provincial government, and the outcome of that review is expected in late fall, early November this year. So what seemed to be a very short timeline has ended up feeling like a very protracted timeline. We always have opportunities to do better as a community, to provide essential services to the marginalized. So whatever the province decides, we're not broken, We do great things in Waterloo Region. We have great synergies and collaboration with the regional tier and the local tier. But whatever they decide, we'll make it work, because that's what we do in Waterloo Region. So I'd like to just reiterate in closing before Ian comes up and asks me really hard questions, none of which I hope he got from Dave Jaworski. The role of chair is totally engaging. It's challenging and it's stimulating. And I think the role of chair is maybe a little bit like dog years. It kind of feels more like 7 than just 1. My husband actually said to me when the federal election was getting going, "Oh, geez, we have to go put more signs up?" And I said, no, our election was just a year ago. And he looked at me and goes, "Geez, it feels longer than that." As in all positions of public office, it is a privilege to serve, and I look forward to the next coming year. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Karen, for joining us. We're longtime friends and do appreciate you always being supportive of the Chamber and joining us today. You've made some comments, but I'd like you to maybe comment a little further. You've served locally on school board, city council, regional council, there we go. I guess maybe the question you talked about, I found it interesting in the introduction that you serve on session at St. Andrew's Church. I'm on a session at Knox Church. We could spend the whole hour talking about the politics and working for not-for-profits or community organizations. But how do all of those things that you've done inform your role as regional chair? Because they're all different roles, but what are some of the commonalities that have come out from those experiences?
What I tried to sort of underscore or highlight in my speech really was, I think, when you look at I can just yell.
You okay? There we go.
Try this one. I really do think it's about the values and the vision. And for me, in every organization, whether it's my faith community, and I think one of the privileges of being in public life as long as I have been is I've been to many, many faith communities, and there's so much more that joins us than separates us. But those values and that vision, when it's shared, and Habitat for Humanity is a great example. Rotary has wonderful values, so it doesn't have to be faith-based, but when people of common purpose come together and find those points of intersection where they can move forward. I really think that those kinds of connections are what move any organization, any initiative forward. And I guess I've said this publicly before too, but I think one of the things that disappoints me, and we're in the middle of a federal election right now, irrespective of what party you're representing, young people are far more likely to join Greenpeace, far more likely to join Amnesty International than they are to look at traditional politics and recognize that those are the things that help change legislation. What happened with at the UN this past week and is still happening and with climate change is really a rally cry, but it will be geopolitical bodies that help facilitate, know when to get out of the way and know when to change regulations and incentives to make sure that we mitigate and stop climate change. Here, why don't we trade back?
We're going to trade back and forth here. I'm going to turn that one off. One of the things that we, as a former city councilor, you actually see that communities and local municipalities in large measure in modern Canadian life drive the economy, drive communities. Engines of economic growth, when we think of things like the environment, there's a lot of leadership at the local level, immigration and the work that the communities do with organizations like Immigration Partnership of Waterloo Region. Are the provincial and federal government actually listening to municipalities about what is needed in the modern economy to grow our community, to create economic wealth, and to make sure that we're providing for all of our citizens?
Having served at the federal level, and I've never been at the provincial level, I would have to tell you that there's a great need to be relevant to the people you represent. And that's difficult when you're in Ottawa, and it's hard when you're in Queen's Park, because the reality is this is the level of government where the rubber hits the road. 30% of people who could vote come out through municipal elections, and yet everything we do impacts you next week, this week, or next month. And this is your business, your family. It's the shape of your community. It's whether you have recreation centers. I would have to tell you, at the provincial level, I think Steve Clark is probably one of the finest ministers that we could possibly have as municipalities, to make sure that the sensibilities, the reality that we can't run deficits, we can incur debt, but municipalities legislatively cannot run into debt. So there are governors, and there's a corridor in which we have to operate. So don't continually to download. I mean, we reacted very well regionally when we took on affordable housing and public housing, and we're the service provider. But there are so many social issues, and people live in cities, so how we resolve those issues and those problems. I'm greatly concerned right now, I don't know if we're going to get to the question, but some of the environmental protections. At one point, I was parliamentary secretary to the Minister of Environment, and I know that the environment is huge to people who live in Waterloo region and across this province. Because we rely so dramatically on our groundwater, we cannot possibly afford to have those protections stripped away. GRCA, the Grand River Conservation Authority, is a stellar organization, and I know Helen's sitting here probably beaming because she's chair of that, but they do an outstanding job. And one of the things I think that we have to keep driving home to both senior levels of government is that one size doesn't fit all, and there are a whole bunch of things that we can demonstrate make us unique, make us progressive, and make us a little bit different than trying to wedge us into a dynamic or a structure that may work for some other communities.
So just thinking about the federal election, the Canadian Chamber, and I think we've talked a little bit about this, has a platform called Vote Prosperity, and it talks about broadly the interests of business across the country, from talent to taxation reform, trade, and the opportunity for small business, infrastructure and communities and environment. So there's a whole range of issues that are covered there. If any of the, or all four of the leaders of the parties were here today, what would you say are the region's top couple of needs, and what would you ask for in their platform? Because we're coming up to doing candidate forums. People will start focusing on the federal election. What should they be asking to support communities, in particular here in the region of Waterloo?
So I would look to the Green Revolving Fund, which started when I was in government with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. And the gas tax that I referenced earlier is actually administered through the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. And they do it efficiently and they do it effectively. So I think I would say to all federal leaders, tell us how your policies, when implemented, will impact the people in the communities where they live. It's really important that it's never just about the what, it's about the how. So I would like to see a greater role being played by municipalities in the formation of policy and implementation of policy, because we're the level of government that can tell them what the unintended consequences might be of something, or come up with a better idea, or give us a program that has more flexibility that we can then tailor to our communities. Because what Waterloo region needs might be very different than what Salmon Arm needs from a federal point of view, and what Waterloo region needs might be very, very different than what Thunder Bay needs.
Just driving here today, and it's not just a regional responsibility, but you can see the roads are changing, markings, and there's more emphasis on things like active transportation, the role of transit. When we see the LRT or ION, and how that's changed the face of community, or the road network. I mean, the importance of transit and active transportation plays into a bunch of different things: community building, environment. Maybe talk a little bit about when people see that change, because there's going to be change. how would you explain the importance of all of those changes that you would see that can look like an inconvenience but are part of the changing face of the region?
I think it's an excellent question, and I would have to tell you, again, I'm probably stating the obvious, people don't necessarily like change. I've had people, I had a round table. I made one promise in the last election, and that was that I would have a regional chairs community roundtable, and I've had two of them, and the second one was just a few weeks ago. And somebody was saying it's ridiculous if you drive down Queen Street that it's a city road and then a regional road and then a city road, and who said you could put all those bike lanes on, and do you know how I have to slow down? So I recognize that change is difficult. I also recognize that people really don't care if it's a regional or a city responsibility, because they look at that as just sort of trying to slough off their issue, and we need to continue to work better together. I think that bike trails and bike lanes need to be safe for all members of society. Car drivers need to be safe, and they need to be predictable. In the last budget, we invested a lot of money in a pilot project around the universities in Waterloo. I love pilot projects because that's how you tease out whether or not this idea will really work. But active transportation is something that people are asking for. When you talk to young people that come to work at Google or the millennials, they want to be able to take their kids on that path. They want to be able to have the option of putting their bike on the front of a bus or on the Ion. So good leadership comes when you listen to the people you represent, but you still have to be out in front. But if you're so far out in front that people aren't following you, that's not a good plan either. So I think active transportation speaks to the environmental issues that people constantly tell us is a priority. It's often not their first or second, although I think it's moving up, but it's always in their top 5. Active transportation allows people to be healthy, to have choice. So I think the greater collaboration and the more seamless we can make the trails and the bike paths for people throughout the entire region, that includes townships, because that's often where you get the nicest cycling. I think it's really important, and it is a priority that we hear from people. And sometimes you have to ask yourself as a legislator, is this our job? Is this something that we can bring about that other levels of government can't, or we can tell them that we can do it in partnership? But it's not necessarily something that a neighborhood association can do, but municipalities at the local level and the regional level can make it happen, so it's incumbent on us to make sure that it is part of the plan going forward.
Moving to healthcare. Healthcare is incredibly important as an economic development tool, obviously for communities, and it's a shared responsibility. Obviously, public health is directly with the region, but some of the work that our chamber would do around physician recruitment, the hospitals, and the infrastructure that's needed in the hospital sector, and touching on things like policing and the impact of mental health, and the prevalence of issues around mental health. As we grow as a community, how will those needs and the budget requirements sort of affect the region, and how do we, what's the leadership role of the region complaint saying, what are the resources required, and how do we have that conversation with senior levels of government, because no one alone can do it?
So I think it is really important to, not that we always have to stay in our lane politically for different levels of government, because we do cross over and there are great linkages. But the reality is public health is a mandate of the region. Health writ large is not. Mike Murray and I spent the afternoon on Monday having a very productive meeting with Minister Elliott. And I think we are in a position to be at the table and be a voice. I'm probably going to lose a lot of friends right now, but I really believe in community-based health delivery, that we have to move farther upstream. And I know that this provincial government is very keen to get rid of the LHIN. I'm not married to the LHIN. Call it Ontario Health, call it whatever you want, but look at examples in Waterloo region where we've done outstanding jobs with e-health, where we have collaborations amongst our hospitals, we have a joint strategic plan, and maybe what we need is a system that's community-based that has 3 campuses. And we have to break down those silos, and it can't just be driven by dollars. I think, again, you have to look at the values. Is this going to be best outcomes and patient-centered? Those are the kind of litmus test that you need to use moving forward. It needs to involve doctors, nurse practitioners. There's some amazing treatment of pain being done at the Freeport location of Grand River Hospital. Medical technology is alive and thriving. There are so many ways that we can be a leader and say to the provincial government, this is your mandate, but help us make everybody successful, with the center of that being what is the best outcome and best experience for the people in Waterloo region. We're 600,000 strong. That's sort of the sweet spot when you look at research for a roster of patients and people that we're going to look after. We're an aging population, we recognize that. So I think we have to look at ways of doing things smarter and different, but it can't be driven by the bottom line. It's got to be driven by outcomes. We need more long-term care beds, and mental health is a ubiquitous issue throughout our region. It is part of the reason why we have so many people living on the streets, why we have opioid addictions. It's not the only reason, but it's a contributing factor. And we need to figure out how we stem that tide. And that can only be done with a full court press by the entire community.
Not going to take a chance. Doesn't seem to be working. Just moving on to economic, or I guess for economic growth here in the region. You touched on the Waterloo Economic Development Corporation. I think it's been, Tony and his team do a fabulous job coordinating with the community. I think it's been a tremendous benefit to the region. We're blessed to have University of Waterloo and Laurier and Conestoga, and that helps fill our talent pipeline and many other benefits in the region. We have infrastructure that many communities don't have. The airport is an example, which over time will be one of those magnets for growth here in the region. We have healthcare that is in need of reinvestment, and we have needs, but we're well served. But there's lots of jobs available already in the community. So we know that we need more immigration. We need more people to fill those jobs. We have job openings in manufacturing, tech, fintech, agriculture, take your pick. What's the role the region can play? Obviously there's economic development, but how do you support the other aspects or community partners in the region along that path for economic growth and to have the talent stream we need to fill the jobs here in the region of Waterloo?
So some of the programs that are offered through social services do have a job component, and some of these people are on the margins already, so they're not going to fulfill all of those needs. Conestoga College had some federal dollars announced this past spring, and they're modeling a welding program for minorities and women. So it's people who are underrepresented in that sector, and anybody who's associated with manufacturing. My husband happens to have a steel business, so I know that welders are a little bit like hen's teeth. It's almost as bad as trying to find PSWs these days. So I think we have to look at the homegrown talent. Immigration is part of it. Getting those people acclimatized into the workforce is really important. Immigration, Waterloo region has been, the region's been a great proponent and participant as part of that. So I think all of that bodes to going in the right direction. I don't think there's one silver bullet. While employment isn't necessarily exclusively or specifically a regional mandate. Look at Conestoga College coming to downtown Kitchener. I think the more accessible and reliable you can make those connections to the people in the community, the better it is. But it's something I think that we all need to be engaged in.
When you and your colleagues around the regional council table start thinking about the challenges before, and you've highlighted some of them. I mean, investment in healthcare, the opioid crisis, affordable housing, and investments that need to be made, the infrastructure broadly across the region. There's challenges and gaps. What would be you personally? What would be the one or two things that kind of keep you awake at night, saying, "Here's what we need, what we need to do, or where we need to go, in order to grow the community and to serve the community"?
You were talking to Jaworski, weren't you? So, two-way all-day go, and this is probably preaching to the choir here, is so important, because when we go on a global stage, when Tony Lamantia goes to Germany or South America and takes a team with him, and we're marketing our region, we get asked things like, how many subway stops from Queen and Eglinton? People don't understand the geography of Canada. You referenced in passing to the airport, and it was Howard Ng at a chamber luncheon about 4 years ago. Three came and talked about sort of the ecosystem and the environment that he sees the GTAA playing vis-a-vis regional airports like ours in Waterloo. Part of that ecosystem depends on ground transportation. So that connectivity isn't just a good thing to do, it's a necessary thing to do, and it'll be a game changer. And part of what we've tried to do with Metrolinx, and we've only been part of their catchment area in the past year, so their planning area, and that's a good thing, and that's a complicating thing. But we need to do the values proposition to tell them why it is so important, because it's not about ridership. It's about connectivity. It's the old, if you build it, they will come. So that airport is absolutely integral, as is faster, more frequent service between here and Toronto, to bring in that talent, to be able to say to people internationally, we have a job force of X number of people. People in South America and Europe really don't care if they come and put their business in North Dumfries, Wellesley, or downtown, uptown Waterloo or Cambridge. They just want to know, is the talent there, and does this make economic sense for them? So marketing on a global stage to get talent and to get investment is key to that. So I would tell you that that's a priority. And the other one absolutely has to be the opioid crisis, because there is probably nobody in this room that hasn't been touched by someone they know or the child of a friend that has dealt with mental health, isolation, loss of job, loss of housing, or cross addiction. It's ubiquitous. It's across our region, our province, and our country. And I know that here in Waterloo region, we have the collaborative smarts to figure out how to deal with this.
Well, that makes question 8 redundant, because you talked about all day 2 weeks ago. I would just point out, I was in St. John, and an old friend of mine is the president of the St. John Airport. And since I was waiting for 9 hours at the airport, we had a bit of time to talk. But I think I should report back. The Waterloo Region International Airport is seen as a leader in the airport community, and that he expressed, without me having to sort of draw him into it, how well positioned we are for the future at the airport in terms of being connected and close to Pearson. Talked about Howard Ng, the importance of being, whatever you want to call it, the reliever airport when GTA gets to. So the investments that the region is making are seen across the country, and I think as it grows and it evolves, that kind of infrastructure sets us up well for the future. So that's a shout out to the regional council and others across, both now and in the past, that have made those wise investments. Moving on, you talked about Municipal Affairs Minister Steve Clark. There's planning reforms going on. There are a variety of things that are going on in terms of new public policy. Trying to manage growth, not only here in southwestern Ontario, but across the country, or the province, to support not only community growth, but respect the environment, to promote transit and new ways of growing communities. Maybe talk a little bit more in detail about what some of those conversations and some of the things that are in place with the Minister of Municipal Affairs and his department.
So one of the things that I was really encouraged to pursue was to be chair of the mayors and regional chairs of single-tier government throughout Ontario. And I remember Ken had said this was really good because you are part of a group called, it's an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, and once a month we go down and we meet with Minister Clark, and we sign non-disclosure agreements, and they bring forward potential changes to policies. And we are sort of a sounding board, and that's a group of people from AMO that I join. So when we first heard the changes to some of the Environmental Protection Act, and we first heard about some of the changes to conservation authorities, inside of me is somebody jumping up and down going, but it's not like that in Waterloo region. I can tell you from my experience at the federal level that conservation authorities were probably the most cogent person to come to the table, the group that came to the table and we could talk about from source to mouth the impacts that farming had, the impacts that industry had, the kind of protections that needed to be there. So we've certainly, in my role as chair of the region as well as my role on the MOU, and this is all in public disclosure now, so I won't have to shoot all of you later. But Waterloo region is so reliant on groundwater, so we need source protection. We've just heard this week, it was actually through Sue Foxton, that they're changing some of the rules around aggregates. And that's a huge concern because there always has to be a balance between industry and doing what's economically positive for an area or a region and protecting assets that are really there for the people who come after us. So I'm very concerned. Our Conservation Authority does an amazing job. The floodwater protection, a whole bunch of things really add to not only the quality of life, but the stability and predictability in a very unstable period of time, right? Like, we don't know, the 100-year storm has now become the 15-year storm. So, and I just want to also put a plug in. I know Waterloo used to be known as the Hartford of Canada because we had so many head offices from the insurance industry. But I go back to my days as parliamentary secretary to the Minister of Environment. I got to tell you, insurance companies got it off the hop. They recognized what global warming could do. They recognized what disaster this could be, and that there would be forest fires and that there would be floods. They were early adopters. The rest of us need to catch up. So I do worry about those protections being peeled back. I worried about species at risk, and that too has been modified to be a little bit friendlier to business, and my question would be why? And I don't think business or developers are the enemy. I think there are partners in how we go forward, and there's all kinds of developers and people in business and industry that take their spare time and their after-tax dollars and a lot of years sitting in this room, and you invest in our community because you don't want to see anybody left behind, and you do care what happens for your kids and your grandkids.
Just a few more minutes, and I want to cover the ION. You referenced that it has literally transformed the face and the look of of our community. It was on the first day, on the first ride for that one stop back and forth at Fairview, and Greg DeRocher and I had went out and decided to do some interviews for business to business, and we caught Carl Zare, and I said, "What's your first reaction?" And he said, "You know what? It's like taking a ride through everyone's backyard because who walks around the rail line, so you're seeing the community from a different perspective, but it really has transformed the community." We have always said as a chamber that the way it's truly going to be successful, and for you referencing how we connect other communities, all-day two-way go as an example, that we need to have this completed to Cambridge. I know we're in the middle of an EA process. One of the things that I think the business community would say is we paid more than our fair share for the first phase because we did it on our own, we made that investment. When and how will the request be made to the federal and provincial government? And I guess this is by way of saying, you've got us in your corner, and the Cambridge Chamber saying it's time for the province and the federal government to do their full share this time around.
And I absolutely agree. We are probably by the end of this year, 2019, going to have our design nailed down, and we're doing public consultations right now. And that will be the time that we then turn to our federal and provincial counterparts. I want to be really clear that when the LRT first started phase one, We were early adopters, and the agreement was a third, a third, a third. That has changed over time, and federal dollars and provincial dollars are now paying for 100% of LRTs. So we need everybody in this room to do a charm offensive, a values proposition, to say to those levels of government, it's our turn. And you're right, there has been, anything great comes with a little bit of suffering and pain, and some of it was the construction, some of it was retailers in uptown Waterloo and downtown Kitchener that really did suffer from lack of traffic. But then I hear the constituents in Cambridge too, and they're saying, you know, we've sort of hauled some of the freight for this. When's our turn? Well, their turn is coming, and we're optimistic that they will get the same kind of investment of private dollars that Waterloo and Kitchener has had. And it's one of the reasons why, for development charges and looking for relief in the downtown areas, Kitchener and Waterloo councillors at the region were very sensitive to the fact that it's now Cambridge's turn. The other, if I can just go on a little bit, the other issue are the townships. And the townships, it's area rated, so they have not been paying the freight for the ION and the GRT improvements, but they too want better service. So I would tell you that one of my priorities in sort of the upcoming years as well would be is to bring transit to the townships. Now, I don't know what that's going to look like. One of my colleagues on AMO is from Innisfil, and they've been using Uber. And that again has an upside and a downside, whether it's dial a bus. I think we have to, again, think creatively, and it doesn't have to be that 18 or 72 passenger bus that people say is always going past them empty. And by the way, nobody says that about the ION. Have you looked when the ION passes? There's lots of people on it. So that's going to be our next sort of hill to climb, is to figure out how we bring more public transit to people throughout the region, because every part of this region is important.
Well, just as a side note, as an eyewitness news report, I can report to you that between 10 and 11 o'clock on Sunday mornings in front of Knox Church, the LRT has good ridership. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I can, as I'm staring out listening to the sermon. Any guess? So I don't want to necessarily get in what the end answer is going to be about regional reform, but it is going to, one assumes, going to impact the region. I guess the question that I have is, did we have enough consultation at the front end, and what kind of opportunity, when the government puts either proposals forward, do you expect? Because one of the things many have asked us is, what's your position on regional reform? And say, well, give us something to actually talk about, and we'll talk about it with our members. But it's impossible for us to have a conversation without knowing what the province is going to put on the table. So was there enough consultation at the front end to get the views of this community into the government? And what will you expect on the back end when they actually release something?
I don't know if you can ever have enough consultation on something this major. What I would have to tell you from my political experience is politicians cannot reform themselves. So whatever changes happen will come from another level of government, and as everybody knows, municipalities are actually creatures of the province, that we were formed by legislation, and they're our master, which is why the Premier could cut the size of GTA Council in half during an election, and it's well within his authority to do it. So I don't think the amount of consultation is necessarily an issue. I would reiterate, Waterloo Region's not broken. Could we do better? Absolutely. There's a great deal of collaboration and cooperation. There's lots of workarounds too. And I guess at the end of the day, the most important question that Ken Sealing and Mike Fenn, who were the two special advisors, asked was, where do you see Waterloo Region? What's the best model 10 years from now? And I think that's where we all should go, is where, you know, the old Wayne Gretzky, where's the puck moving? We want to be there when it gets there. So I don't know what their prediction's going to be. I think Mike Sealing and there is a Mike Sealing, Mike Fenn and Ken Sealing probably have put forward a very good report that none of us will probably ever see because of its advice to cabinet. I don't know what the prediction's going to be. I know that Steve Clark has been adamant that it's not going to be announced till after the federal election. And again, we'll make it work because that's what we do.
Listen, thanks very much. I think I don't know where Bill went. Oh, there he is, right there. He's skulking behind me. I wasn't noticing you. That's all the time we have for questions today, but I do want to thank you for joining us today, Karen. Thanks.
So we have a little bit of time here. We'll take 4 questions from the audience for Karen, and we've already muzzled Mayor Jaworski. So 4 questions. Karen, I'll let you pick.
They're speechless.
Speechless. She covered it all.
Wow, that was easy.
Yeah.
There you go.
Oh, there's one. All right. Back to back.
I have a big outside voice. I think you haven't touched on climate change. It would be valuable in
Thank you, Diane. That was Diane Freeman. You have a special status through FCM as a climate change ambassador, right, Diane? Climate change is huge. It's here. It's undeniable. It's one of the reasons why we're investing in public transit. It's one of the reasons why Tom Galloway's riding his bike everywhere, I'm sure, and riding the Ion. The people will take transit. They'll take public transit. They'll choose to if it goes where they want to go, when they want to go, and it's affordable. Some of our planning as well, the intensification of existing infrastructure is good for the climate. We have Sustainable Waterloo Region, which has evolved one building in the research park. We've been great supporters and participants in that. And that is a demonstration project that as we move forward, we can be leave a lighter footprint. REAP, which is the Regional Energy Efficiency Program, I see nodding heads, people know about that. For $400, you can have an assessment of your house and figure out how to make improvements and investments in your home that will save you money and will be energy efficient. It's a really tried and almost trite comment, think globally and act locally, but I think those kinds of improvements will make a huge difference. The infrastructure for recharging station, the fact that we're going to a more efficient, clean diesel bus purchase, and I keep pushing electric buses because they pay for themselves in about a year. So I think we can continue to improve, but again, we ask ourselves at the regional level, what are things that we can do to either facilitate or change or regulate that other people can't? And we're always keen to continue on that vein. And I have to tell you, it's the community and civil society that keep pushing that envelope, and school kids, because they get it in spades.
I think that's the leadership at the universities and the college around environmental improvements also as well. And I think that's why we focus on transit and some of the things that can actually turn the dial. I always also say, every time I see a tweet from Tom where he's biked and that he's on the LRT, I tell you, I cannot get out the Kingston, some of you will know this, the Kingston Trio and MTA, because I just remember that song of Charlie getting lost on the MTA, and it feels like sometimes Tom's lost because he never is not on the thing, so I wonder if he knows how to get off. I think that's it.
Yeah. That's good, yeah. Thanks. That's good, Ian. Do you remember the tune? Will he ever return? Will he? Yeah, okay. It's enough of that. Karen, thanks a lot. You were talking about community. Oh, we have another question? Absolutely, go ahead. Go ahead. Do you want the mic?
Yes, I think. Thank you. So my name is Hilde. I have been working with a lot of new talent that has been brought into the region. And you've touched a lot about attracting and welcoming people. So from my experience, I think I've assisted over 100 individuals, new talent coming to the region in the last couple of years. And I see a little bit the same story when I spend time with them. In the beginning, they often feel a bit reluctant to how to figure out this area and how to find the same lifestyle that they come from, depending on the area where they come from. And I keep assuring them this is a true gem, this area, but they need some time to figure out what makes it so attractive. So how do you think as a region we could work together to more aggressive in a positive way marketing of this area, not this area just as a region, but this area in its larger geographical setting. So how do you think we can improve that a little bit? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. And, you know, in my earlier comments too, one of the things that bodes well for Waterloo Region is really location, 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 because we're able to offer a rural and an urban experience. When we were at AMO, Mike Murray and I joined forces with Perth, Wellington, and was there one other? And Huron, to argue that the G2G, which is the Guelph to Goderich Trail, should have a much longer lease, like a 50-year lease, so that we could continue creating community, and community are very invested in that. The reality is Tourism Waterloo Region and the Waterloo Economic Development Corporation, I think, do a really good job of giving us an outward-facing entity and message to the rest of the world. But people live in communities. And to go back to one of Ian's questions about governance review, excuse me, when I was at this level of government, excuse me, and John Sweeney did a report, one of the things that he said was that governance does not equate to community. So I think some of the things that you're talking about really are at the local level of government, and it's who is on your neighborhood association. Are they inclusive? Do they know who to contact? Is there a walking group? Are they a dog person? All of those amenities exist. Not necessarily a direct responsibility of regional government, but certainly the local level of government is the one I think that animates those communities. And irrespective of what the governance review brings forward, we absolutely need to protect our urban-rural character and honor community, because community, I think, defines the quality of life that we enjoy wherever we live.